Hey everyone, welcome back for another video. My name is Tanya for those of you that are new here, and I'm a watercolor artist. So a subscriber asked me about a week ago to paint a poppy, and I had never painted a poppy before, so I thought it'd be fun. So I hope you enjoy the video. Okay, so to get started, I've got my Arches watercolor paper. I have two paintbrushes, a size 1 and a size 5. I have my pencil, my eraser. I have 2 cups of water, one for cool colors, one for warm. I have my paper towel, and I have my Winsor Newton watercolors. All right, so when I Googled my image of a poppy, it said as long as you have anywhere from 4 to 6 petals, you'll be fine, because that's what the flower grows, anywhere from 4 to 6 petals. So I'm going to do 2 different perspectives here. I'm going to have one flower kind of looking up and one kind of looking at you. So it'll show you 2 different ways of doing it. So you always start with your center first. Even though you're not going to see your center, you want to start with your center because it's your base where all your petals come back to. All right, so I'm going to start with the one petal that's right in front, and I'm going to kind of cover up that. So basically you're not going to be seeing the center. This is the front petal that's more like right closest to you. Then I'm going to bring this one out, and you can make these as ripply as you want. I'm going to make this one coming out too. So it's basically like this one was coming back in like this, even though I'm going to erase that line in a minute. And also, if you don't want to use a regular pencil and you want to use a watercolor pencil, you can definitely do that, and then maybe you don't have to erase all your marks because it'll blend in as soon as you add the water. All right, so like I said, make these as shaky and ripply as you want. Bring that petal back down. Even though you're not going to see this, we'll erase that later. And then this one will come up and back down this way. So basically this is the one in front. And I know it's a little confusing to look at right now, but it will all come together. All right, so I did this one here with 4 petals. You can do 6 if you want, or even 5. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to erase the pencil marks that I don't want to follow along with. It was just to kind of guide me how my flower was going to be. All right, so this one here, the center is down here and it's looking up. So once we start painting that, it'll make a little bit more sense. This one here, I'm going to do looking at you. So I'm going to start with my center, and this center we're actually going to see. And you can start with making all your little petals. And let's see, you know what? I'm going to throw in another petal and maybe another one up this way. So I'll have this one doing 6 petals. So here again, I'm going to erase the marks that I'm not going to follow along with. Okay. Oh, and one other thing, I've said this in plenty of my videos, but try not to, if you remember, although I'm at fault for this too, when you start erasing, try not to brush it away with your hand for 2 reasons. Number 1, your hand has oils on it and it will get on the paper and your paint won't stick as well. And number 2, you may smear your pencil mark and you don't want that. So always take a brush and wipe away your eraser shavings. All right, and then we're gonna make our little stem coming down, this one here and this one here. And then I'm actually gonna make a little bud. They have cute little buds. They're like little ovals. And I'll have this one just coming down like that. All right, so that's really about all we're gonna do for the drawing part. So now I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna wet my one petal. I'm gonna actually do the petal that's closest to me first. And you wanna kind of make it, these petals are really delicate and really thin. So it'll be like a little bit darker as you get in the middle of the flower, and as you get towards the edge of the petals, it's going to be a little bit lighter. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're going along. And I'm just using, I think this one is my Scarlet Lake. So see how beautifully that's blending in? Because I had already wet my, so it's wet on wet. I wet my paint and I wet my page here. Now, if it's not pulling up as much as you want, you can always help it along. but you want your darkest part more towards the bottom. I'm gonna wash off my brush, come in with just some water and play around with it a little bit. Just kind of go in little circular motions and just kind of get that whole petal nice and filled. All right. Now I'm not gonna go on to the next one. If you wanna go ahead and blow dry this, you can, then you can go on to the next one right next to it, but I'm not gonna do that. So I'm just gonna skip ahead and I am gonna start making some of my petals over here. Because I don't want my two petals to blend into each other. If they're still wet, they will blend into each other. But like I said, you can go ahead and blow dry if you want to. So here again, I wet my petal first, and then I'm just adding my paint, coming in with a clean brush and just working it up, blending it in. And now's the time to kind of fix your petals. If you want them to come out a little bit more, be a little bit fatter, a little bit skinnier, now's the time to do that. All right, so I'm gonna go on to this petal over here, and I'm wetting it first. Starting at the base of the flower, closest to the middle part here, and I'm letting it bleed up. Washing off my brush, and oops, I still got a little drop of water on there. And then I'm gonna slowly just kind of work it so it goes up towards the tip of the petal here. There you go. Just like that. And we can always come in and add more layers if we want to. We'll see once it dries if we want to add a little bit more. All right, so this petal is not completely dry, but I'm gonna go ahead and wet this one over here. Now, if you're a little nervous about doing one wet petal next to the next, then just go ahead and dry it. Use your heat gun, use a blow dryer. And here again, the middle is down here, remember? So we're gonna make this part of our petal darker. And I'm carefully trying not to bump up to this petal because then it's gonna start re-wetting this petal here, or the paint is gonna start bleeding into this petal here, and I don't want that. So I'm carefully leaving a little negative space right there. And you can work this one up also, like that. All right, I am gonna go ahead and I'm gonna dry these really quick so I don't have to worry about one petal bleeding into the next. While I've got a lot of red on my brush, I'm just gonna make some of these a little bit more saturated with the paint. Instead of wasting that paint and washing it off in my water, I went ahead and just added a little bit more where I knew I was gonna be adding some in the future anyways. All right, so before this really dries, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna blend it up also. Okay. And I will work on this one. And I don't know if you noticed, but I'm going directly from my paint to my paper. I'm not using my palette. I'm going directly from my little pan here, directly onto my paper. If you feel more comfortable, you know, using your palette and just getting some of that paint off your brush, definitely, you know, go for whatever you feel more comfortable with. But this is just what I feel more comfortable with for this painting. All right, so now this flower over here is pretty dry, so I'm gonna go ahead and add a little bit more. So I'm just gonna wet down here a little bit, not the whole petal, and I'm gonna add a little bit more. So that way, if you don't add water to your whole petal, it's not gonna bleed all the way up. It'll just bleed to wherever your water ended. And then you can start controlling it a little bit better by just pouncing your brush and just adding a little bit of water where you want. And then the paint will just slowly follow along with that. So you have a little bit more control if you add the water slowly up the petal at this point. I'm gonna do the same thing to this one. See, the paint is not going past that. That's where I had finished putting my water, right there. But now, if I want to go ahead and blend it in a little bit, I can. And I have a little bit more control. All right, so at this point, I am going to start adding a little bit of Payne's Gray because I want a little shadow inside the flower here. So I'm going to add a little bit of Payne's Gray and just let that bleed up. So wherever the center of your flower is. And I added just a little bit, not a lot. And I'm going to do the same thing to this one over here too. And my flower is still a little bit damp, so I'm not wetting it right now because it is still a little damp. But if you feel like you need to add a little bit of water to it, go for it. So I was using my size 5. I didn't even mention that, I'm sorry. I was using my size 5 for the whole painting, but now I'm going to move to my size 1 really quick. And I'm just gonna delicately bring some of these little veins up the petal. Not too many, because you don't want it to be all lines, but just a little bit. Now I'm gonna move back over to my size 5, and I'm gonna blend them out a little bit. If I think they're just a little bit too pronounced, then I'm just gonna soften them up a little bit. So I'm gonna be switching back and forth from my size 5 to my size 1. So here again, I'm adding a little bit of Payne's Gray more towards the middle. Now this petal was dry, which is totally fine, but I'm gonna move back to my size 1 and I'm gonna bring them up a little bit. And you wanna follow along with the curve of your petal. A little bit more. So see how already, just by adding that little bit of Payne's Gray, is it's pushing your center back. So I'm going to soften that up a little bit. I don't want all those lines everywhere. I do want some of them, but not all. All right, now I'm going to take a little bit more Payne's Gray. So my whole center here is nice and wet. I'm going to add just a little bit more Payne's Gray to deepen it up right in the middle here, just like that. And once that dries, we'll see if we need more. All right, so let's go ahead and work this flower, this flower again. So I just want to bring that up a little bit. I'm not liking the way that was blending together. If you think that it's a little too dark in some areas, just take your paper towel. If your flower is still wet, you can lift some of the paint. Okay. All right, and I am going to deepen up the Payne's Gray on this one as well. Mostly just over here. And push that center down. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of my sap green and I'm going to start working the stems here. Now these poppies have very delicate, thin stems, and they actually have these little prickly things that come out. So you can even do a couple little like hash marks coming out from the stem here. Give it a little detail. Now, if your stem bleeds into your petal a little bit, that's fine. If you don't want it to bleed into the petal, make sure your petal is nice and dry before you go onto the stem. Okay, and we're gonna do this little guy over here too. So I'm gonna make him green, but with a little bit of red peeking through, almost like the flower just wants to come out already. So I will put a little bit of red down at the end here too. And I will let those bleed together. And if you want to add a little highlight, or leave a little highlight, I should say, then just leave a little bit of negative space. You can always come in and darken that up later. I am going to take off some of this red because it bled way too much up at the top. So I'm going to take some of that off. I'm going to re-add my little sap green right in here. Perfect. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start adding a center, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to dry this really quick. All right, so I'm going to take a little bit of my black. I have some gouache on my palette here too. If you don't have gouache, don't worry about it. Just use black or Payne's Gray or whatever you want, but I've got gouache, so I'm going to use my black. And I'm using my size 1 again, and I'm just going to go around and just deepen up that center a little bit, and I'm just doing little polka dots, because these are like the little seeds on the interior of the flower here. So it just gives a little bit of detail. Now, if you didn't dry your petals, I highly suggest you drying your petals first before doing this, otherwise everything will bleed together. My petals were still a little damp, so it may bleed a little bit, but that does not bother me at all. All right, and then go ahead and pick up, I believe this is my cad yellow. And I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna make a center here also. And I'm gonna just do little dots. You can fill this in nicely if you want to with the yellow, but I'm gonna do little dots because I want some of the white showing through as like a little bit of a highlight. So I'm not gonna cover it up all the way. But if that's the look you're going for, definitely do it. I'm letting my yellow and my black bleed together a little bit towards the edge here. It's okay to bring some of that black in. Gives it a little bit more depth. So I don't know if you can see that, but some of my black bled into my yellow here, and I like that. So I'm gonna leave it. All right. So we're gonna let that dry. Now we're gonna go on to this one, and I'm gonna do the same thing, but since it's not really the center of the flower, because the center of the flower is down here, you're not gonna see all this beautiful work in here. You're just gonna see a little bit of it coming up. So I'm taking my black again. I'm just going to deepen up my petal here. I'm going to bring up a couple of these little stems, and I'm going to do a couple little polka dots. Oops, a little too much water on my brush. It happens. Just dab it off and start again. And you can add a few over here too, because the center of the flower is actually not just on this petal, but it's on the inside of these also. Okay. And I know we didn't add a leaf, we didn't draw in a leaf, but I'm gonna go ahead and add a leaf really quick. These leaves are really delicate, really pretty. They're very light and airy, but they also have a little bit of those little spiky things on them, just like the stems did. Oh, and I forgot to put little spikes on this stem. And then even the little head here of the flower, it's got some little spiky stuff too. So I'm doing like little polka dots in the front because those are like looking at you. And then as it gets to the side of the flower, I'm just doing those little hash marks again. like that. All right, so the leaf is, you know what? We could draw this out really quick if you want to. I'm just gonna do maybe a leaf looking, peeking out. Where should we do it? Right, let's do it right here. I'm gonna do one just peeking out a little bit right here. Okay, so the leaf comes in, it's just a line, and then it's got all these little veins. So that's all we're gonna draw at this point. So it's just a line with a couple little, lines bleeding off it. And it's kind of spiky. So I'm just doing little hash marks. I'm going from the outside in, and this way, outside in also. So from both sides of that little vein, go from the outside in. And just Google a poppy and you'll see what I'm talking about with the leaf. It's a little tricky, but it's really, really pretty. And I've only been using my sap green here. You could throw in a little yellow if you want to, which maybe we will do. And so that one is underneath the flower here, so I don't really want to show it too much. I should have saved a little bit more room for the leaf. I didn't think I was adding a leaf, but I thought maybe it needed a little bit more green. So if you want to really add some leaves, leave a little bit more room than I did. Because that doesn't really show you what the leaf looks like, but kind of gives you an idea. So just Google an image of it and you'll see. I'm gonna throw in a little bit of my yellow just to give it a little bit more lime in some areas. I'm gonna move over to my 5. Blend that in a little bit. Okay. And actually, I think I want to add a little bit of my yellow to my petals too. You could have done this before, but you could always add it in here at the end also. So I just want to give my petal just a little bit of yellow. So I added a little yellow on my size 5 brush, and I'm blending it towards the middle. So this one here, all the other petals we started from the inside out, and this one we're starting from the outside going down into the center of the flower. Now if you think it's a little too much yellow, you can always take your paper towel and dab it off a little bit. I just want a little of that yellow peeking through, but I don't want to take away from the red of my flower. That adds just a little bit more dimension to your flower. Take off a little bit over here too. Okay, and I think I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of yellow to these flowers also. And my paper towel is getting really saturated. So once that happens, go to a different paper towel, because once it gets saturated, it doesn't pick up the color very nicely. So I'm going to add a little yellow here. I'm going to blend it in. Now that's a little too yellow for me, so I'm adding a little bit more water, lightening it up, and then I'm going to take my paper towel and I'm going to just gently dab off some of that yellow, just so it leaves a little bit of a hint of yellow. And you don't have to do all your petals. I didn't do this back one. I'm just going to do several of my petals that I think maybe just need a little pop. That's really, really pretty. I'm just gonna lift up a little bit of that because I don't want it too yellow. And maybe I'll do this one over here too. And lift it up a little bit. That's really, really pretty. I think I want to just do a little bit more Payne's Gray down on the bottom here, just to round this one petal off a little bit. There, that rounded it out. So just, I'm taking clean water now and I'm blending that up a little bit. I just wanted to add a little bit of Payne's Gray down here, just to give it a little bit more shadow. Just felt like it needed it. Maybe down here too. So if you just kind of sit back and look at your painting for a minute, you'll see where you need lights or darks or maybe a little bit of a different color. Like we added the yellow. I thought it needed a little pop in there just to make this a little bit prettier. So just sit back and you'll see where you need a little something. And sometimes you need to give it an hour, step away and come back to your painting, and then just you have like a whole fresh new look of it, and you'll see what you can do to it. So I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks so much for watching the video. I hope you liked and learned a little something. And if you did like it, please give me a thumbs up, and you can write a comment in the comment section. And don't forget to subscribe if you want more videos like this one. And you can also follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Have a great day. Bye.